So there was a time Rob came on my shows a few times, and I think semi-jokingly talked about the fact that as much as he loves Ozzy was seemingly raiding his band members, and he felt like he was becoming the farm team for Ozzy's band, whether it was you or Blasco or others that Rob felt he had wanted to take but didn't. Talk about that transition. Talk about making that move away from Zombie and becoming Ozzy's guy.
Well, musicians are musicians, and there's only so many guys out there. So, really, there's a lot of people, but there's not really a lot. Whenever I need a plumber. There's a million plumbers, but you want that guy who is going to do a good job, and I think that's why that happens a lot of the time. A lot of the same guys show up in certain bands because we're good at what we do. I think that's how it is, and it's just like his band now. John was in Marilyn Manson, and his drummer now was in Marilyn Manson. So it all goes around, and it all works out in the end. So after when I got a call to go play with Ozzy, I just had to go do it. We all have to do what's best for ourselves at that time, and there I was. I have to go play with Ozzy, and I was happy to do so. And that's been a great, I'd say, almost 10 years I've been with Ozzy in some incarnation.
Now, does that happen, Tommy? Like, obviously, Rob and you guys played on a lot of Ozfest. So, like you said, everything is sort of connected. And as a guy like you, who's played with a lot of people, and you mentioned there's a fabric to everything. I imagine that happens because you're on Ozfest and around Ozzy, even though you're not in the band at that time. And the word gets out when they need a drummer, hey, that could be the guy. Was that the catalyst for it?
That was not the exact catalyst. This was kind of a weird one. I had got called in, it was the time when they were looking for a guitar player. Ozzy was looking for a new guitar player, and they got Gus G to be the new guitar player. I was brought in because they didn't have a drummer at the time to do the audition for Gus G, and I wasn't. That was the first time Ozzy saw me play, was at Gus G's audition, and I don't think they really were looking for a drummer. But to me, I was going to make them look for a drummer. So to me, it was my audition also at the time, and that's how I actually got the Ozzy gig, was from Gus G's audition. Now, I don't know if they had seen me before. Maybe a little word had spread, and maybe that helped that other scenario. I don't know. But everything is an audition. If there's any advice I can give to any young musicians, it's that every time you play, you got to be on. So you never know. Even if it's some audition, every time you go do it, it's going to lead you to the next thing if you got the goods. So make sure you have the goods.
When you played that audition for Gus, do you remember what the songs were?
It was, the usual 5 or 6 that you would think: Bark at the Moon, I don't know, Paranoid, Mr. Crowley, and maybe War Pigs, or, I'm not sure, but it had to have been something like that.
So even though that's technically, at that time, that's an audition for Gus G and whoever else they were trying out on guitar, it ended up indirectly, without you realizing it, although, like you said, it was in the back of your mind, this could be an audition for me too.
Absolutely. Now, what was going on, they had to do a show. It was called BlizzCon, which is like actually this big video game thing out in California, and their drummer at the time couldn't do it. So out of that audition, they said, do you want to do this gig? And I said, sure. So I did the gig, and then I did the gig, and I think the gig came out of me actually playing a gig, and they go, oh, this works, that kind of thing. So I actually did one gig, and then they called me to go play with them.
When you go into a situation like that, Tommy, you're going in to play with a legend like Ozzy and a catalog like Ozzy is going to play, and a catalog that the drumming on the songs you're doing has been all, for the most part, other people, and all great players in their own right, but a wide gamut of people who have played on that stuff. What is your approach to doing other people's material? When you go into it, are you going to do you want to go in to try to be as faithful to what's on the record? Do you take the direction of, in this case, Ozzy or whoever's running the music and saying, no, we want you to cut loose a little bit? Like what's the approach for a guy like you going into a situation like that from a playing perspective?
I just let my ears tell me exactly what to do and my gut tell me. And that usually leads me in the right way. There's, when you get to a certain level, Ozzy doesn't want to have to tell you what to play, and he's not going to. He just wants it right. So you got to do your homework to kind of know. To me, something comes up. I don't care if I was 12 and I'm doing a gig back in Detroit. I'm going to do anything and everything to play that music to its full potential. So I'm going to learn every little note. I'm going to, this is before YouTube. I'm going to go to the record store and get all, when I auditioned for Nugent, I learned the whole set, not just the 5 songs. And I still do that today because people, if you know somebody's show and you can go in there and play it right now and not give them a reason to tell you no, what's probably the answer you're going to get? So that's my approach. I just do anything and everything and try to kick ass. So I always try to remain faithful to what the audience wants to hear. That being said, I know that my approach and my energy and my spirit will come through playing somebody else's parts. I'm still going to be me, even if I'm playing the same parts. My energy and the way I attack the music is going to come through. So I don't have to change things. I try to. A lot of the times when I join a band, I notice sometimes the music is far removed from maybe where it should be, and I try to bring it back a little bit, if that makes sense.
Well, yeah, that's kind of like where I was going with that, because over years of touring, sometimes the person whose band it is, even they realize and lose track of the fact that from playing over and over so many years, so many decades, things kind of become something different, and the live arrangements or the different musicians take some turns with it. One of the most recent stories I can think of with that is Frank Ferrer, who plays drums in Guns N' Roses, who I know really well. And Frank, and when Slash and Duff came back, Slash and Duff both said to me that they, coming back into the band, realized that what Axl was doing with all the old Guns material it had actually gone off on a different path, and it was very different than the way they were used to playing it. So a lot of the reunion with Guns was Duff and Slash working with Frank Frank was only doing what was supposed to be done at that time, what he felt was right, and those guys saying, no, you got to come back, and this is the way we used to do it, and this is what we want you to do. So you can have differing opinions on that, can't you, from within the same band, if things just kind of go off on a bit of a tangent?
Yeah, I notice when people start talking and you got to do this, there's probably a problem. The music should just play itself. So especially for drummers, I think sometimes drummers or musicians, the spirit and the feel and the heartbeat of the music is what you want to capture. So when you're talking about how do I approach a gig, I really dig into what is making this music special. What makes this music, why does this music have this style? Why does Rob Zombie sound like Rob Zombie? Why does Ted Nugent sound like Ted Nugent? I don't play the same way or approach the same way for all those bands. I want to be the best drummer Rob Zombie ever had. I want to be the best drummer Ted Nugent ever had. I want to make their musical visions come through better than, and not have to say it, so they can just play and do what they do. That's what front people and musicians want. They want the freedom that their drummer is there with them, behind them, leading the rest of the band any way that they're going to go. So it's kind of like a drummer is a conductor. And when you don't do that homework, you don't dive into it. And it's not just playing the parts. That's a big misconception. It's getting in there, knowing everything so well, and playing it over and over. So it's like you were the drummer 50 years ago when they were rehearsing it and just coming up with it, if that makes sense. It's a deeper thing that if you don't go deep, you're not getting the true heartbeat of what makes that music great. So that's my approach more than anything.
And needless to say, Ozzy leads to Sabbath, and I saw you on the final Sabbath tour. I was at the show in Vegas. I thought you did a phenomenal job throughout that whole thing. Tell me what it was. Was it disappointing for you when you didn't get the call to play on the last record, to play on 13, but ended up doing the tour? Talk a little bit about that.
That's show business. That's all you can say. Not everything works out, but in the end, it works out. I'm glad I got to do the tours, and I think I made a good dent, and I was very proud of what I did on stage with those guys. And, you know, I can't think about what I didn't do. They made a great record. They had a #1 record, and you can't argue with that either. So there you go.
Do you prefer doing live or studio as a drummer?
If I had to choose one, I'd choose live every day, baby, because that's what it's all about. That being said, I love the studio, but if I had to pick, get me on that goddamn stage.
And is there a part of you like, I mean, I know you're a professional. I pride myself on being a professional, but at my core, I'm still a fan as well. So, you always got to check those moments to maintain a professional demeanor. But when you're up there, and I mean, even to this day, I mean, I know Tony, I bowl with Geezer and I text with Tony, and that's still surreal as the fan to me that I know these guys like this. But when you're on the stage and you're sitting there on that drum riser and you're playing on the final Black Sabbath tour and you're looking out at the backs of Ozzy, Tony, and Geezer, is there a moment where you're sitting there saying, holy shit, like I'm playing in Black Sabbath right now? I would imagine there's almost, no matter how pro you are, there's got to be a moment where you're pinching yourself, right?
Yes and no. Meaning, the best thing about playing with those guys, it's not that it was Black Sabbath, it's that all three of those guys, they may have their differences, but when they go on stage, they are 110% into being a group together, more so than anybody I've ever played. It's a unit up there. That's what makes them so great. Tony may lead a certain part of the set somewhere or a song. Geezer may lead a part, and this guy may step back and that guy may step forward, and they're backstage getting ready for the show. They're not worried about Instagram or meeting people. Everybody on that stage, myself included, was 110%. That's what made it so great. On top of that, playing amazing, legendary, iconic music with the guys who wrote it and created it was undeniably awesome, and it was a privilege, and it made me a better musician playing with those three guys together, and that was an honor. More so than it being Black Sabbath, if that makes sense, because that's a special thing, that's a rarity, and that's what makes them Black Sabbath. You can't have a career that all of these guys have had. It's no mistake for any of them why they're still successful and people want to hear their music. It's no mistake why Ozzy is still successful. It's because he's awesome. Tony is awesome. Geezer is awesome, you know?
When you're going through that catalog and you're playing in Sabbath and you're digging into all the Bill Ward stuff that Bill did and his, the brilliance that he recorded it with those records. Same deal. Are you getting input from Geezer and Tony on this is how we want to do it, or just listen to the record, or do your own thing? Like what are you hearing from those guys when you're trying to prepare?
Here's another thing. English people are much different than Americans. Americans are much, do this, do that. They say absolutely nothing. Absolutely, really nothing. You're expected to do your homework, and I did do my homework. I do always do my homework. That's the only reason I'm able to claw and try to survive in this business. But they said, they gave me a list of like, here's 50 songs, 50 Black Sabbath songs, which you probably only play 16, 17 of them. But basically, which was every track they ever did with Ozzy. So I learned them all. And then when you show up and you know everything, and it's just a process of chipping away at the stone and going over, because the difference in the Black Sabbath stuff is those drum parts Bill Ward came up with was very unorthodox from any other style. So I had to dig, on top of digging into the music, I had to dig into his playing and what made him, because all four of those guys had their unique counterpoint to make a whole of that music. So I really had to do justice to that, or attempt to do justice the best that I could, to make people, when we went out on tour, hear what they wanted to hear. That was my goal.
What are you being told, Tommy, as far as Ozzy? We all know he's got some health concerns, and nothing's more important than being healthy. But what are you being told as far as anything in the future? Do you think, are you optimistic that he'll be able to tour again?
I know Ozzy's making a new record now, and I know he said he's going to go back out and play. And if they say he's going to go back out and play, then that's what he's going to do.
You're not part of the new record?
No, I'm not. I didn't play on the last record, and I'm not playing on this one. I believe his producer, they got all that covered.
Yeah, Andrew is working with him again, I know.
Correct.
And do you think that we've seen the end of Sabbath? Do you think that they'll never play again?
I'm the last guy to know anything. And that goes with just all musicians where I don't. I mean, they said it was the end. Is it the question? It's the best question. Is it the end of the beginning or the beginning of the end? Right? No, nobody knows.
I don't know if there's ever been a band that has done a farewell and ended. I tell people all the time, Ozzy's first farewell tour was in '92, No More Tours tour. So I don't know if there's ever been a band that ended and stayed ended. We know Motley Crue just burned their contract and all of that. So that's why I say that. I talked to Tony a couple weeks ago, and he's getting ready they're putting out a reissue of Volume 4, and they're putting out reissues of the Dio stuff, and he seems like he's getting an itch a little bit. So I don't think with any of these guys you can never say never, because I all think it's so in their blood that there's no, if they can find a way to get back out there, you never know.
How do you stop it? How do you stop it? You don't. You can't. You literally can't stop. If you're able to do so, everybody needs a break and everybody needs time for perspective to go home to their families and do this. But I'm never going to stop. I'll tell you that. I can't stop. It's what I do. Without it, you're just piddling around, So nobody can stop, especially when you can still do it with greatness,
Yeah. I had the opportunity to go on the...
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say I had the opportunity to go on the road with Deep Purple a few years ago at a tour of Mexico, and I think they did it the smartest way. They called their tour, and they're still calling it The Long Goodbye. And I said, well, you're not really saying it's a farewell tour. And they all said the same thing. They go, well, we're just telling people we're kind of thinking about ending, but it's a long goodbye. I don't know how long the goodbye is going to be. Yeah. And I was like, well, I guess that's the way to do it.
It's crazy. I mean, I bet those guys back when they started 50 years ago, there's no way they could fathom that they would still be doing it now, because bands didn't do it that long back then. Jazz musicians did. Jazz musicians did it until they died. Blues guys did, but rock and all that kind of stuff, it didn't carry on in the same way. Now it does. So it's kind of like you either do it or you don't. It just kind of ends. God ends it in a way. Little Richard went to the end. Jerry Lee Lewis still does it. I mean, it's insane. Country guys, they go till they're dead, till they drop. And what a better way to end it.
Thank you for tuning in, and please hit that like button, it's appreciated. Make sure that you subscribe for more rock related content.